what industry can you play with, design, location, food, beverage, entertainment from the morning to the late night. Every single day part has a moment, right? The morning is the big blowout for the morning. The afternoon is, and then the sunset, and then like the early evening. Each one has to be a high note, and you have to be as creative as you can be. And at any given moment, you can create a moment of awe and a moment of magic.
That was Michaelangelo L'Acqua, who is the Global Director of Culture and Entertainment at SH Hotels and Resorts. We had a fantastic conversation talking about everything from his origin in working in music and then in fashion and then ultimately in hospitality. Over the course of his career, he has connected all the threads of everything that he's done to inspire people to create these incredible environments, these successful brands, all based on engaging all five senses. If you want to really up-level the way that you think about creativity, if you want to become a more human-focused organization, then this is a conversation you won't want to miss. You have a really, really interesting role. You are Global Entertainment Director at SH Hotels and Resorts, and you're one of the very few individuals that hold this title. At the very top of the industry. A lot of hospitality brands say they care about culture. Few have roles in their organizations like the one that you have. I wonder if you could describe for our listeners what your role covers, and then I'd love to get into your journey that led you to this.
Sure. I'll speak in generalities versus specific to SH, but I'm usually like a creative director in the entertainment and culture space, but like a creative director in residency, right? I'm never a full-time employee because when you're full-time, your head is completely focused on the brand, right? You see nothing outside of the brand because you're not there to do it, right? You have a title, you have a role, but for me as like a subcontractor and a creative director in residency, my head is on a swivel. I'm seeing everything that can service my client at the fullest degree, right? Whether that's a trend, and has a lot to do with trends, right? Where is our the psychographic of our demo? Where do they vacation? How do they migrate throughout the world? How do they consume? What are the fashion trends? What are the wellness trends? What are the music trends? What are the cultural trends? So I'm constantly looking at everything, and then I'm looking at through the lens of, let's say, a brand's DNA, a brand's internal culture, both internal and external, because there's two, right? Sometimes they're not aligned, and sometimes when I come in, I help them align the internal culture with the external culture, or develop an external culture and then reteach it to the internal culture so that a brand can then expand. But yeah, in my role, it usually starts always with music. What is the soundtrack? And when I look at my my history and how I started as a composer, I started with Tom Ford. I was a starving musician in New York City. I got an opportunity to do a small little fashion show for Cynthia Raleigh. It made a big splash because at the time, 1999, few people could remix and had technology, right? This is an entirely different universe. I'm dating myself tragically with the gray hair. Um, so anyway, right place, right time, opportunity with knowledge and technology. I got a chance to do a demo for Tom Ford and became music director for Gucci and Saint Laurent when Gucci bought Saint Laurent. So within that space and started working with all these really top fashion designers around the world, this is really where I learned how to be a translator of another person's vision, right? So I became a vehicle of expression for somebody else. I started to look at music in different ways, not just music. It had to do with an emotional state. It had to do with colors. It had to do with fabric and textile, right? It had to do with memories. This is what all these fashion designers would teach me, and they were all masters, from Karl Lagerfeld to John Varvatos to Ralph Lauren to Diane von Furstenberg. They all were. I was there to be their vehicle of expression. From those days, matched with composing film and TV commercials, started to see life is a movie that played out. So when I did music, it was as if I was scoring either the context or the subtext of a film that played out. So if it was the context, music plays out like this, and the person, you and I, are the lead role in the event, right? Like woo! And then the subtext is you and I are looking at each other, watching the sunset, but the music is playing all the dialogue, right? The music is the emotion. So when you take that knowledge and you start to place it inside a physical space, you can then start to manipulate with people's conscious and unconscious connections to the space, right? To the moment that is present, because you usually are present at a hotel more than you are, because nothing's hackneyed, nothing's normalized, everything is new and exciting. And then we can create these moments of awe, which are hospitality magic, where the music is playing a certain way, the cocktails taste so good, the sun is setting, and then the service is like precognitive, right? They're inside your head, and before you even finish with that cocktail, they're like, "Sir, can I get you another one?" And when you put all these elements together, you create moments of awe and magic. So I always start with the soundtrack, because if the soundtrack is off, we can't we can't create the through line between sensorium, right, the five senses that work seamlessly together to create, this conscious and unconscious experience, right? And the
I appreciate you getting
unconscious,
into
yeah,
the details of that,
sure,
just because I feel like still so many people I talk with have questions about what is the role of music or sound in the
mm,
hospitality experience. And I'm hearing from you, it is context, it's subtext, and you've described how it can, I'm hearing the versatility of music or sound in amplifying the experience on every touch point you have within a hospitality environment. And that was true. I mean, it's true in hospitality. Now this is kind of an area of your work, but this
yeah,
was true in fashion. It feels like a fundamentally human reality that music shapes everything.
everything, and it is one of our core innate abilities. You do not need to have any knowledge. It is blinking. It's the same thing. Your ability to consume sound and blinking were born into us. So once you start getting into levels of mastery on music, this is where you can translate. And I'm a firm believer in like the samurais. There's like this whole analogy that, the moment you learn how to write calligraphy and you're a master of calligraphy, you become a master. And then anything else you touch, you start with a mastery level. Then you can pick up the sword and you begin as a master, and then you just learn the rest of the technique. So I ramble
Did
on
your
that.
early experience as a violinist underscore this for you? Do you feel like pursuing mastery in that field has led to mastery elsewhere?
I think, if you're going to, yes. And I think if you're going to choose to play classical music, you are a neophyte until maybe one person breaks through to be considered a master, right? Like out of all the people that are trying to play. And then if you're going to play jazz, it's the exact same thing. Like my teachers played on all the records of John Coltrane or Miles Davis or Thelonious Monk or Dexter Gordon. Um, these guys were masters. I was a small insect, on the ground of their world. So I think like when you strive to be a master, you strive to express yourself at the highest levels. That's why I say I failed upwards. I couldn't express myself fully as a composer. I couldn't express myself fully as a producer or guitar player. So I kept on pivoting somewhere that I could find a space where I could express myself and people could listen.
It's this journey
Um,
of life, though, right? We're trying
yeah,
to find that fit, and you have to. There's going to be some failure along the way.
a
But
lot
even
of
as you
failure.
described your transition from being a musician in a classical sense, and then jazz, and then you talk about entering the fashion world, and having been picked by the iconic designer Tom Ford to really infuse the runways that he is displaying his art. With music is interesting to me. And you mentioned kind of you learned about what it takes to translate someone else's vision. I wonder if you could speak to what does that take? Because I feel like in hospitality, whether it is the owner or maybe developer of a
Yeah.
property or a brand, it feels like a lot of our listeners are going to be in that job of translating a vision into manifesting it in the world. How do you do that well?
Again, I'm of the older generation. I'm of the analog generation. So the time that you need to put in to even achieve opportunities is different than today, right? So through that analog transition of study, get an opportunity, fail or succeed, study, work hard, right? This creates humility, and you're surrounded by masters all the time, and they're letting you know you're not much, right? You're definitely not there. Totally different place than we are today, right? You can, get a DJ equipment and in 3 hours practice, and then that week and have a DJ gig. It just didn't happen back in the day. So the reason why I frame that is to express that humility is a big part of being a vehicle for another person's expression, right? I don't come in a room with what I want to say. Like that first opportunity to be a vehicle was with Tom Ford, and the last thing he wanted to hear was my opinion about his world, right? And then every other person that I worked with was the same thing. So I would have to really, really find it within myself that I am not the main character in this experience right now, that I am a tool in someone else's world of expression, and I can determine whether I'm going to be successful or failure based off of how much of my ego is being challenged or not challenged, right? Where is the success matrix? Is the success matrix that I truly was able to interpret this genius's vision, or was it a failure because I wasn't able to inject my own personal feelings or emotions into this other person's, right? So I think this, over very long periods of time, gets you to a place where I am a vehicle. When I'm hired by somebody or I'm working with somebody, I am a vehicle of their expression. And um, it's harder to do that nowadays because everybody wants to be a main character. Everybody wants to be a main character in their life or their film, So a young person that goes into a hotel brand, they're like me, potentially, right? And that's a hard place because the brand is going to be like, whoa, 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 we're a multi-million billion dollar brand. It's not about you, it's about us. And can you create a vision that's tailored specifically for us?
This is really helpful because you've been known to tell your team members, especially new people joining, the teams that you work with, that ego is the killer, right?
Mm.
Of kind of making things happen, right? And so you have to operate out of this humility that you're describing. I think, hearing you describe this, maybe it begs the question. You mentioned fewer people may be thinking this way than before. It sort of begs the question, why collaborate with others? Why work with others? Is there something that you can create that is more beautiful potentially in through collaboration, even if you're not the star character, than if our listeners are just working on their own?
I think if you are a creator, you're always constantly trying to create and tweak the formula, right? And most of us are crazy, right? And most of us mull over, the OCD of like, oh, I should have done that and I should have done this and it had, like it didn't work that time. So if you have that in your mind, constantly trying to figure out the formula, trying to work out the Rubik's cube of creativity, the quicker, faster, more creative, then when you start to work with other people and you are open to collaboration and you're open to be a vehicle of expression, then you can start to get to like play the game at a super high level, right? Like if I'm working with somebody who really doesn't know anything about what they want, it sucks. It's really difficult, right? Because then I have to be me, right? I have to give an opinion about what I want and what I think, right? Versus working with, some of these companies are incredible and they know who they are, right? They just haven't translated into sound or experience on a very, very deep level. That's a great game. That's a chess game, you know? That's me bringing my best ideas and translating what I think this brand is, or the history of the brand, and how we can maybe retell a story from a long time ago and make it more relevant and new, and then marry it with, some cultural gurus that could also, find magic and inspiration, and then we can create something even larger. Those are the opportunities that I strive for now, not the, I don't know. What do you think? What I think is I want to go to the beach. I live in Mexico and just relax with my dog. I don't want to have to, I'm either working really hard, but I don't want to have to, heavy lift somebody that doesn't know anything, So, and luckily my career has been one of one incredible brand after another that's completely challenged me to levels of doubt, and this is the part of the ego, right? You doubt yourself. Um, can you pick yourself up? Can you move forward? Can you still go back the next day with the most open mind that you can have to be that vehicle and to achieve whatever your client considers success for them? So,
I wonder if we could touch on collaboration in another sense. Maybe not people that you're working for
mhm,
or with, but
yeah,
external partners. And it feels a lot of your work has been, whether it's working with artists or other creative collaborators, working with others. I
yeah.
wonder if you could share an example of a collaboration or an activation that you're especially proud of, could be anywhere. What went into making it so meaningful or special? I'm very curious on the details of how you do these.
For the last several years, I've been on the strategy part. So the actual activation space, I haven't been in full production unless I'm doing the charity work that I do, right? So in the charity work, I work with AMFAR, the AIDS organization. They produce these incredible galas, and it's an orchestration of the best individuals in the business at every single level, from the lighting mastery to the show callers, stage design. I would say my most relevant ones are, the huge Amphar Gala that we produce in Cannes every year. I've been doing it for 15 years. The UNICEF galas that we do in Sardinia and in Capri. These are one because there's an output, right? It's not just working for a company and get paid. Like, we're there to raise as much money as humanly possible to then give it to other brilliant people to help other people change their lives. So I would say, and in these events, they're like a 10-hour live Oscar, right? Everything you see on TV for the Oscars is done live. That's the exact same thing. There's about 3 hours of cocktails and sunsets and DJing that I do, and then it goes into 6, 7 hours of a gala where there's like speakers and videos and movies and performances and auctions, and it's just this beautiful orchestration that is live, and there's screw ups, and we all cover each other's ass, and everybody who's on the team is just, you know, I make the analogy, it's probably a bad one, but it's like working in the military and like we get a job and like the team comes together and everybody's like just the best. So,
I love that, focus, you're taking everything you've learned over your career and now using it to give back as part of the things that you do. You mentioned really focusing on strategy now, and I wonder if we could speak to that for a
sure.
little bit. How do you strategically think about entertainment and culture, make it not just something that's kind of fun to experience, but really
Mm.
core and fundamental to what a brand or what an organization can be?
It really depends on how deep the organization wants to go, right? Strategically, we could start with music. I'm known as the music guy, so I always start at that level. So just strategically, maybe they don't want this deeply evolved soundtrack behind it. Other, companies might not have ever been posed the question of how deep do you want to communicate through music to your guest, right? And that's when we can create a customer journey, right? That then goes into their existing customer journey. How are we going to talk to them, pre-arrival, during, host, right? How are we going to create memories? What are the tools that we need? What are the best practices? What are the SOPs? It starts to get very nuanced, just the way every other aspect of how they operate is nuanced. Because most people think music is just music. It plays. It's there. No, but if you can get deeply methodical, then there's a system on how we engage and how we touch people at every single aspect, from marketing to in real life, to brand partnerships, to digital, to sponsorships, to you name it. And there has to be deeply thought out protocols and engagement tools on every level. And then there has to be creativity, right? So how does that creativity then trickle down into the entire mechanism? And then if you're looking to scale, then this is why brands would do something like this with me, is because if they can figure this out, then they can scale, right? Just the way they have their pre-development budgets templated and they can throw it in, or their development budgets, they can then plug this in, and then they know they're opening at a formula that's up here, not a hit or miss, not, oh, this food and beverage director's thought this for that, and this GM likes EDM, so we're going to do a little EDM. There's a formula, there's a package, and there's security, at least as much as you can have, with scaling your brand, and then regionalizing your brand, and then acquiring clients and whatever ROI that the company would want from it. And then outside of music, then we're talking about experiences. I can go deep into the wellness space, and not building wellness, but like, how do we create experiences, right? Who are the right people that are trending in a certain space to do a pop-up activation or a series, activations, or, who are the individuals that we can develop a speaker series on, right? So that we can create value to the guest that's on property, and maybe we can scale that into a series that travels around the world, to all the different properties. So I go through all the different sensory touch points, and if a brand wants to, we can go deep into ideation on the experiential component of what they're inspired by, so that we can inspire the guest.
You're taking something that maybe is, some might view as, kind of touchy-feely or woo-woo, and you're building some process around it. I think you described it as, what was it, the sensorium, or just like all of our five senses, engaging them. You talk about the customer journey. You talk about, each touch point also within a hospitality property. There's so many ways to express this. So there's a lot of there. I think you mentioned scale, right? So an output of this is taking away some of the variability of hospitality business. Used to always be so hit or miss, I feel. It either works or it doesn't. You're really bringing a little bit more predictability to that. I imagine it can also be a challenge when you bring predictability on how do you stay fresh and inspiring and not turn out to be your cookie cutter chain hotel. How do you think about that tension and pushing past that?
I'll make the analogy of jazz, right? There's a song written, right? Bernstein wrote a song, and we're all going to play it, okay? On paper, that's the guidelines. These are the chord changes, these are the rhythms, right? There's a beginning, there's an end, and there's, flow of the melody, right? Perfect. Every person that gets handed that will play that song. But the jazz component is the improvisation and the interpretation of the song, right? So if you had John Coltrane playing it, he's going to be playing the song, right? Exactly what it is in the paper, but he's going to add his context and his flair. And if Miles played it, it would be a different totally vibe. So when you create the structure for the song, the composition, when you scale and you give it to a hotel, let's say in Australia versus one in Asia, they're going to interpret, right, the value, the relevance, the creators that could play that song in a different way. So when you're talking about hotels, there's usually some sort of cultural director involved. If you are in, more of the lifestyle luxury spaces, you have a cultural director, you have a concierge. When they have the song, they're going to play it and be like, oh, here in Singapore, these are the cool kids that do X, Y, and Z, and they know how to play our song. So let's pull them into the fold, right? The game plan, the roadmap never changes. It's the people playing the song that do. And that's why it becomes much more easy to scale when you have a book of music. We can play this, we can play the ballad, we can play the upbeat song, we can play the mid-tempo one, and then we can create motifs in between, which are melodies that change. If it's da 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 da, the next time we play da 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 ba 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 da 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 da, you know. So I think within the framework that I can provide within the strategy, there's implementation rules, and then there's room for interpretation.
It feels like a paradox, right? Where these constraints or these guidelines almost could empower more creativity.
Absolutely, because when you're dealing with young people or people that might not necessarily understand the output of what is needed in the hotel lifestyle space, they can go rogue. They have a lot of ideas, but they're like, oh, let's do this and let's do that, and blah, 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 blah. They don't finish ideas. They have run-on sentences, but if they're in a framework, right? And the ROI is very clear, then the creativity can flow within that. And then they have direction. And then part of my job is to always it's being a mentor, it's being a boss, it's being a shaman, it's being a psychiatrist, because younger people these days, that are creative, it can be stifling to work inside a corporate environment, right? So again, ego. All artists have ego. My job is to hear them, understand them, tell them I love them, I respect them, I see the creativity in them. But right now is not the time to challenge the individuals that are hiring you. So let's just bring it down. Let's listen. Let's be better, and let's create more. So that's another component to my job, which I really do love, working with super, super creative younger people. Because then I could play up my strengths, which is the gray hair, you know?
Do you feel the context of hospitality provides this interesting canvas for people to express themselves creatively in a way that other
100%.
industries don't? Could we be a
I think
magnet for
it's
creative talent?
Yeah, I think it's the industry. I mean, what industry can you play with, design, location, food, beverage, entertainment from the morning to the late, late, late night? Every single day part has a moment, right? The morning is the big blowout for the morning. The afternoon is, and then the sunset, and then like the early evening. Each one has to be a high note, and you have to be as creative as you can be, so that you don't know when the person's coming into the room, the guest, but they better be wowed. And at any given moment, you can create a moment of awe and a moment of magic and a moment that resonates and a moment that you can recall after the stay. This is what I'm constantly thinking about, right? This is why I go like kind of crazy. It's like if I could get this formula just right, then when they leave, if they get the email on the playlist from the hotel that they just stayed at, and it's like sunset sessions, and they're of course they're gonna pop through it because that memory was so vivid. And then if they hear the soundtrack, they're like, I'm back. Josiah and I remember we were there and we had that, and you were drinking that cocktail and it had the thing in it, and and that other person walked by and we were both like, oh my God. And we're in the moment again. And music was able to do that, right? And then they played the soundtrack at their dinner party and people were like, oh my God, Josiah, you always have the best music. Well, the brand gave it to you. And now it's a part of your life and it's part of your home experience. So this is how I'm constantly thinking, and this was very much my days at the W, where they allowed me to nerd out, let's say, on experimenting with culture soundtracks, and people became obsessed with it.
I became obsessed with it, and you haven't stopped. You keep innovating, you keep creating. You told me before we started recording that you're a student of the human condition, human evolution, and
Yeah.
all the trends that come out of that. It feels like you're very attentive to what's going on in the world. It's always changing, of course, right? We're at a bit of a strange time right now, right? Obviously, with
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, so many. I mean, that's just one technology, but there's many elements of our culture that are changing all at once. I think you've described this as a great divergence
Yeah.
in humanity, and in 10 years, we may not even recognize kind of the environment we're in. And you mentioned something along the lines of, kind of wanting to stay connected to that human experience, and that might be
Yeah.
analog. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to that, because I imagine, you're not the only one thinking about that. A lot of our listeners are probably thinking about, it feels like everything's changing. How do I navigate this?
Yeah. I mean, I think at being somebody who comes from the analog world, right? There was no cell phone, there was no social media. I accomplished a lot of aspects of my life and growth within no one seeing it, no one even knowing I did it, right? And then all of a sudden, one day, I arrived and I achieved. So I think the analog component, where you actually have to work for the experience, you have to work to find the person by walking somewhere physically to sit with them. All of the analog aspects of life that are not played up as like cool these days are inside the hospitality space, right? Younger kids obviously are going to be in front of their phone, but in general, even younger kids will stop and be like, wow, there's so much here in real life for me to engage in. So I look at what we're going through right now as the grand divergence, right? Um, my generation, your generation, we're the last humans on the planet. This is blows my mind when I think about this. The last humans on the planet since the time we stood upright and made fire. When we die, there will be a new race of humans that will only know a digital world, right? This is the grand divergence, right? So the stories of I walked uphill both ways, I lived life without a cell phone and I didn't have social media. Like we sound like grandpa nowadays. So I think um, hospitality is the one space. So they can automate everything. They can digitize everything, right? And you can have a computer and a robot making your meal and what have you, but there will be bastions. There will be oasis of human connection, and those will be hospitality driven, right? When you go to the airport and you have to punch in the shit, I hate that. If there was a restaurant where somebody's there and they get to say, "Hi, how are you?" I'm going there 100% of the time. So I think there will be bastions and oasis of human to human connections and experiences. And this is where we can become even more human, right? I don't want to go into human to human space. And this might sound arrogant if it's like not thought of, not thought out. It's boring, it's hackney, there's nothing contextual in there. But if a bunch of masters created the space for me, oh my God, it's like a field day. I'm just like, oh, this is great. Oh, now the taste and the smell and the touch and the feel and I think that's why I stay close to luxury, right? It's being challenged tremendously um, because the creation of luxury is pure mastery, pure vision. So whenever I think I might get to a point in my life that I maybe, and I don't do this often, I might pat myself on the back and be like, okay, you're still in the game, you're still kind of relevant. Then you go into this mastery space and you're humbled again, and you're like, whoa, like even though I've been doing this 30 years, I gotta step my shit up right now because I'm surrounded by a bunch of masters, and I think that aspect is so human. It's so human. It's all about expression. Take the money and making a return on your investment outside. The people that actually create inside pure luxury are geniuses. They really are, and they're masters at different levels. The interior designer, the person that tailors your clothes has probably been doing it for 30,000, 28,000 hours. Like you don't think of how much human input in real life, analog time that they've done. to create this space. So I think that's the grand divergence. I know I want to age in a analog space with a bossa nova song playing in the background. Um, and who knows? I mean, I think luxury is going that way still. There's a lot of space that they have to learn to acquire a new generation of loyalists. As I touched base before, there's $80 trillion in wealth being transferred from the boomers to a younger generation. They do not they don't define luxury the way our grandmothers did or our parents did. Okay, they define it through experiences, they define it through context, they define some of these people define it through an output. Like, I will only embrace brands that actually have an output. Like, right? What is their social responsibility programs? Am I donating, $2 from my check and you're matching $2 to a charity? Like, people will be like, I love that. There's an extra $25 on my stay for what? Some people are like, for what? And the other people are like, oh, it's for my wife's Syra hospitality, training school for locals. Damn, it's best $25 I've ever spent. So I think this is where I hope my longevity is within the industry, is that I can offer a new point of view within the systems and the strategy to acquire this new generation.
Hearing you say that and thinking about your work in the middle of culture and entertainment, the notion of relevance feels so important. I'm curious how you think about that and how you quote unquote stay relevant, because I guess just hearing in our conversation so far, I'm hearing and thinking about different notions. It's almost like knowing yourself and knowing what you enjoy. You mentioned analog, you mentioned, some of these very classic things. You also talk about big changes happening in the world. What does it mean to stay relevant to you, and how do you think about that?
Well, it really depends on your lens, right? And where you are within your life. If I was a 35-year-old man, being relevant would be staying in New York City, right? Being in the trenches and consuming as much knowledge as humanly possible about what is new, on the nuances of newness, and what little enclaves of culture are doing that, and how's this, and blah blah blah, right? Like that's been the character that I've been for majority of my life. And then the pandemic hit, and I had to rethink what were values, right? And also my age, right? And what I wanted. So my wife and I moved to a little town called Todos Santos in Baja, Mexico. We've been coming down here a very long time. We bought a farm, we built a beautiful house, and staying relevant now has changed. Like, I'm here. I'm, have dreams and plans of creating something with my wife in time, but being relevant is being first in line on let's say chasing a dream. You see these people and you couples and you hear stories like, oh, and they did X, Y, and Z and they moved somewhere and it just sounds like it happened. It didn't just happen, right? You have to follow a trend. The trend is my age, my dreams, and going to the right place at the right time with the right skill sets in order to wind up there, so that when you walk into this new relevance, right? I'm there going, hi, am I making any sense on this? It's core values and how you see yourself in the present moment. The way I see myself in the present moment being relevant is chasing a dream, trying to maybe personalize my own expression versus externally giving it to other companies, but within a time frame. Maybe when I'm 60, it will all be about me and my wife. But being relevant is migrating outside of your comfort zone, taking risks, and following a trend that might not be the one that other people are chasing. It's the one that you see yourself as, if that makes sense.
Definitely does. I thank you for sharing that. And I, before we go, would love to hear your thoughts on what's giving you the most meaning right now. You touched on some of your philanthropic work. You touched on mentorship. You're doing a lot. You're involved in a lot right now. What's giving you the most life? What's giving you the most meaning in your world right now?
It's funny. So I recently started deciding I want to DJ again, but I want to DJ like I used to DJ a lot, and I just kind of like stopped thinking I was a DJ, and then I started getting really self-conscious, and then I keep on thinking that I can't DJ anymore, and I don't know how to, but yet I keep on getting these events and charity gigs, and then I'll finish DJing and I'll be like, wow, that was just the worst I've ever DJ'd. And then people will be like, holy shit, that was the best I've ever heard you. And I'm just like, what's going on in my head? Like, why am I self-doubting? Why am I, self-loathing? Why am I getting into the old creator that I was? And what's inspiring me right now is I'm having a sit down with my inner child and myself, which is the true creator. I'm just a vehicle. I'm just the shell, right? But the inner child is the creator, and I guess we're having a dialogue right now. It's like, can we have fun with music again, right? Because everything is so serious for me. Like clients are on me, and I need to hit home runs, but there's no like just playing for play. And there's all those cliche movies, when you watch baseball players, and it's just like, can we just play baseball like we were when we were kids? Like, let's get to the fun of it. And that's what's inspiring me right now. It's like I've done the last like 3, 4 gigs. I just performed with Cher and for Amphar. Next Saturday, I go to Saint Tropez and I perform with Kate Hudson and Will Smith for another charity event. And I'm kind of like owning it, which I haven't done before. So I'm hoping, and I'm putting it out to the universe, that because I love it so much, and I have so much fun, and it's the only time that I can really nerd out on music, because I don't just DJ to DJ, I DJ to play jazz again, right? And it's funny, there's a artist named Elu. He was Obama's piano player for the inauguration. He's incredible. He won the Monk Award, but now he wears these cufflinks and he plays piano, plays rock cover songs, and he stands in like a split, and it's very dramatic, and he's just incredible. But he's a genius music, like Thelonious Monk National Award. And he heard me DJ one time years ago, and he came up to me and said, "How long did you study jazz for?" And I was like, "How do you know that?" And he's like, "Because you're playing changes." I've never heard anybody play changes means you're playing chord progressions, right, with the actual song. So every song is in a key, and then I'm playing changes within all the different songs, moving around the keys that I like to play in. And I never realized I did that. And I failed as a jazz musician, and I started applying that type of knowledge back into DJing, and I want to be that person again, to have fun. I want to grow old playing music, making people, laugh and enjoy themselves because I enjoy myself. And it just, life got a little too serious, and I need to learn how to play and have fun again. So that's what's inspiring me.
I love that. Michelangelo, thank you so much for taking some time to share your thoughts. I feel inspired listening to you. I will include links in the show notes where people can learn more about you and your work. But I really enjoyed our conversation today. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.